huge movie fanatic Nate, coming to review The Rocketeer. This movie, as far as I really know, was like probably my first favorite movie of all time. Like the first movie where I was just like, holy shit. Like don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure I saw this movie 7 times in the theater. 3 or 4 of them times was a second run theater. I think it's 7. It's a lot. I'm pretty sure it's 7. If it's not, it's a lot. Okay, 5 for sure, but I don't know why the number of 7 was always in my head for the amount of times I've seen this movie in the theater. Obviously, this movie came out the first day of summer, I think, pretty sure. I know it's June 21st, 1991. I was 14. I was anxiously awaiting this movie because I had been a fan of, obviously, Batman in '89, Dick Tracy in 1990. So, I mean, it was a third time is definitely a charm as far as I'm concerned for this. I was looking forward to it as the months approached, and it seemed like to me at the time when this movie was coming out, like it took forever. When I was 14, it seemed like the summer just came and went. It just seemed like forever until it finally came out. I'm pretty sure I saw it either opening day, opening weekend, I'm sure. And when I walked out of the theater, oh my God! When I first saw this movie, I was completely amazed. First of all, this movie introduced me basically to 20s, 30s. Well, it takes place in '38, but it introduced me to the basically the big band music of the era. And of course I got the soundtrack of the tape right away because I didn't have a CD player yet, so I got the tape soundtrack and those 2 songs, which actually I watched Rocketeer recently on Blu-ray, or rewatched it recently within the last few months, and when those scenes come up where that woman is singing those songs, I didn't cry, but some tears came into my eyes because, I mean, those 2 songs, those 2 renditions of those songs just teleport me right back to 1991 and being 14, and just, that was like the best summer of my entire life, I think. It was a magical year because I was just getting into so many new things. I was getting into, Exorcist 3 was new on video, Die Hard 2 was new on video, Bride of Reanimator was new on video, Predator 2 was new on video. There were so many things that were new on video, and I was discovering older things for the first time, like Amityville, and I was just 14 when I was just discovering so many movies, and it was the most magical summer in my entire life. The summer '91, I'll never forget it unless I get my head clonked really hard or whatever. But I don't know how long this review is going to be, because like Terror Train, Rocketeer is and always will be one of my favorite movies of all time. The movie is like pitch perfect. I guess, well, I mean, we'll just say it's pitch perfect. The one thing, I didn't obviously know anything about the comic book, but I've since gotten some of the comic books after the fact, and when you look at the comic books, one thing you do realize is maybe the guy who played, what the hell's his name, who played Cliff, is probably a little too old in retrospect when you actually look at the comic books, but that's not a huge qualm or whatever. But this movie, as just a movie, is pitch perfect. The guys who wrote it actually wrote transfers, surprisingly enough, and the guys who wrote it were just geniuses because it's like pitch perfect. And I was a big fan of, obviously, that era, even at that time, because I was interested in Dick Tracy and I was interested in that era, the 30s and stuff like that. And to me, I have this, maybe it's this movie, but I have this thing about being drawn to like Southern California, 1930s, aviation, Hollywood, all of that stuff, and this movie might have began that fascination or that interest with all those things, 38, Southern California, aviation, Hollywood, all of these things, but it encompasses all of them things so magnificently. And I mean, needless to say, Jennifer Connelly, when you're 14, or any age for that matter, but especially for a teen, and when you see Jennifer Connelly looking the way she did in this movie, I was, there was pretty much one girl on my mind that summer after June 21st, and that was Jennifer Connelly. And to me, she was at the time, she looks so young now, but at the time, I mean, for me, she was just like the embodiment of Holy Mother. I mean, Holy Mother Mercy. She was perfection, and still is pretty much in that movie. She's just, Jennifer Connelly is it's pretty actually risque in a PG, kid movie, where she's like stroking the part of the plane right as Bill Campbell, that's his name, I think, says, "It's the closest I've been to heaven, Mr. Hughes." And he's like, "Well, maybe not." And then they both look at her, and she's like got that seductive look, and she's stroking this part of the plane. I'm like, yeah, that wasn't planned. But other than that, the movie's a really nice child, friendly movie. Well, there's some scenes like when Lothar, bends a guy in half and all that stuff, and there's some heinous scenes. But what's funny is, the movie, played, it opened kind of big, and then, I can't remember how many days later. Well, I mean, T2 came out on July 3rd. So after T2 came out, no one was, like when I went to the theater, no one was in the theater for Rocketeer. The beautiful thing is, I've seen it like 3 or 4 times in the second run theater, and the crowds every time was packed. So it was absolutely fantastic seeing this in the second run theater 3 or 4 times, because everyone loved it. Because you'd have all audiences of like all ages. You'd have old people, they'd laugh at the jokes, and I just loved seeing it with that group of people in the second run theater, because everyone loved it every time. And where do you start? I mean, the beginning is fantastic, and that very awesome, yellow GB racer that they just built, and the genius of the, just opening it with that, and he's like, yay, the plane flies, and again, I'm not gonna, I segue into just describing the movie because you're so passionate about it. But, this movie obviously introduced me to Alan Arkin, and, that's another movie that was out that summer on video, which was Edward Scissorhands, and obviously I'm like, oh, cool, the guy from Rocketeer, and whatever. So, and the casting's just perfect. I mean, Alan Arkin's just perfect as PV. I mean, although Bill Campbell's is probably a little large and tall and old for Cliff Secord. I mean, obviously he was the first thing I knew about Cliff Secord, and I love him in the part. Jennifer Connelly, obviously, I've already mentioned, and let's not forget Timothy Dalton, who is the absolute, who's just come off of playing James Bond in the last 2 James Bond movies, who is the absolute perfect actor to play the role of Neville St. Clair, and what a fantastic character of Neville St. Clair. Now, I don't know anything about comics, so I don't think that character was a character that existed previously in a Rocketeer comic. Maybe someone can confirm or deny that. I think that character was an invention for the movie, but just that name, runs chills down my spine and brings me right back to '91. But Neville St. Clair, and perfectly, conceived and executed, the character perfectly conceived and perfectly executed by Timothy Dalton. And the whole aspect of him being a secret Nazi agent and working in Hollywood, and the super, secret rocket pack that was stolen from the, and here these hoods are working for this guy who they don't even know is a Nazi agent, and to steal the rocket pack so they can do dominate the country and take it over with, rocket packs and all this fantastical stuff. And they have that great cartoon, which is kind of creepy to see a Disney cartoon with Nazi flags raised, but whatever. That's kind of creepy. But that's a creepy video, and it took a man's life to get this out of Germany. Watch this, kid. But I can't, I guess my one complaint, and like I say, is just a small little nitpick. My one complaint, and I think it's something that I've always had with the movie, if I'm going to make one nitpick about the movie, it's going to be the South Seas Club scene, the quote-unquote action scene that takes place there. We've already established how powerful the rocket pack is, and the fact that ever since I saw it, I didn't really like that scene, because basically, there's scenes where he's just like, flying along as if he's like this way. I mean, these are his legs, and he's hanging down, and he's flying over tables like this, and the amount of, I'm okay. I know I'm nitpicking, but the amount of like precision in pushing the button down at the right amount to just like, hover like that is just, that scene I have a little bit of a problem with. Okay, I'm not gonna say that because too many people say that. I don't like saying phrases that everyone else are saying, but I almost said it. But so that's my only qualm about the movie is that scene. But it's great when he goes in there, and that scene is so funny when he's like, "Have you worked here long?" "Oh yes, I waited on you last time," and he's just like standing there, and he does the flowers. It's so fantastic, and I don't know. I can't imagine. This is like a Disney movie, PG. It's a summer family movie, and there's two shots where the camera. Well, the first shot isn't a pan down. It's just a shot of her tits with the newly splattered soup on them, and then the second shot is even worse because obviously Jennifer Connelly knew they were doing it because it's when she meets the guy who so perfectly plays W.C. Fields. I mean, you'd think it's him, and the camera's like, "Charm, my dear," and it's like, "Doubly charmed," and it's just like, oh my god, this is a PG Kids Disney summer movie. What the hell are you doing? But whatever. But I didn't, when I was 14, I didn't mind because let's face it, that's what all the straight hetero males in the audience, regardless of age, were thinking anyway. So you might as well just do it, pan down, which was a precursor to the Megan Fox panning down the body stuff. But I think let's face it, I don't mind, but I do think it's pretty vulgar, and I wonder what she thought. I mean, she was like 18 or 19 or whatever when they did that. It's just like, okay, Jennifer, now, Joe wants to pan down, for this shot, so, because W.C. Fields is referring to your tits here, so you don't mind, do you? Oh, it's a little trashy, but like I say, it's what all the guys are thinking anyway. I mean, except for that little nitpick, the Cell C's Club action scene. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal, and the great. I was fortunate enough to have gone like in 2010 to Griffith Observatory, and there's probably video right now, or I'll cut to the video of me doing a tour of the Rocketeer. Of course, it's location of many more movies than Rocketeer, but for me, Griffith Observatory is like one and only. Like, if the first thing and last thing it is the Rocketeer end battle location. So it was very cool to actually be there, and I try to go to all the spots where the main action points happen and point out and this is where this happened and that's where that happened. So it was very cool to stand on top of the observatory, right where Jennifer Connelly, Tiny Ron, and Timothy Dalton were, as Timothy Dalton fires off some shots down at the FBI forces, and before they make Jenny Blake board the Zeppelin. So I was standing right there doing a shot-by-shot report of where these particular moments in the action of the scene happen. But I gotta tell you, I was extremely grateful when the Blu-ray finally came out, which was a little bit before the 20th anniversary. Like, I can't remember exactly, but it came out like I think a few months before 2011. But I think it's touted. I think it says 20th anniversary on it. And unfortunately, and it's really a shame, that there's like no special features. It would have been nice. I mean, it's it was a big movie at the time, and I know that they wanted it to be like a franchise. They wanted it to be like the next Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I swear to God, if it wasn't for T2, man, it very well might have. But T2 just frickin' destroyed Rocketeer, and that's one of the things about T2 that I'm kind of mad at T2 about, because it completely stole all of Rocketeer's business. And if that hadn't come out when it did, I mean T2, I think Rocketeer would have done a lot better. But I haven't even mentioned, which is completely unspeakable, but I haven't even mentioned yet James Horner. This is one of my favorite all-time film scores, and obviously, I already mentioned I got the tape in '91, and it's still like, when I just watched this like a month or two or a month ago or something like that, and when I put the Blu-ray in and their music started, like tears began to well up in my eyes, and that's how that's how important this movie is for me, because it just slingshots me back to 91. I'm 14, and this movie is absolute magic. For me, it might be one of the most magical movies experiences for me ever. And what I was getting at before, to revisit, and what I was getting at before is when the Blu-ray came out, it was so amazing to finally see it in that aspect, or to see it that way again, because for the first time you could see like all the grain. And it's like when I first watched the Blu-ray back when it came out, I'm like, oh my stars, I haven't seen the movie like this since I saw it in the theater. Like, you can see the grain, you can see all the film. It's not a perfect Blu-ray, but for the most part, I mean, it's obviously better than anything on video since. So to see the movie on Blu-ray now is just so great, because it's so close to recapturing what I remember so well the 7 times I saw it in the theater. And I remember being very bummed out when the tape came out, because the tape came out, the movie came out June 21st, and it didn't come out on tape until I think February of 92. And obviously, since I'd seen it probably up to, if not 7 times, I was very much had the framing in my head. And obviously this movie is shot wide, wide, which I like to say. This is a really quick way of saying wide. You just say wide, and I was very, like, so many shots, like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's completely cropped, like, because I had the framing memorized in my head, There's so many shots that are like, oh, but there's a shot where there's a profile of that guy, the gangster, and he's like, to Neville St. Clair, and the camera goes up to both of them, and Neville's head is on one side and the gangster's on the other, and the pan and scan, they could only like come up to the gangster, and then they did a pan over to Neville. I'm like, oh my god, it was such a tragedy to see it that way. When I was a kid, I was so disappointed, because I'd seen it in all its wide glory in the theater 7 times. But I was able to actually put, like, somehow have the Laserdisc put on tape. I think it might have been as early as a year later or something like that. So I was able to get the widescreen version on tape, which was very great. But I don't really know, like I say, I don't know how long this has been going on, or this review has been going for, but Rocketeer, absolutely magical movie, and it's just all around just perfection. And by the time the movie ends, and he's got, he helped out Howard Hughes, so the plane that was destroyed at the very beginning, he's got a brand new one. It doesn't look, I don't like necessarily the way it looks, the black and white, but it's a replacement GB for his races and all this stuff. So I mean, the movie to me is like almost as perfect as you can get, as just an overall constructed fictional tale wrapped up in this superhero package of 1938, Southern California, Hollywood, aviation, perfection, music is perfect, Jennifer Connelly was perfect. It was just like something magical happened when they did this movie. So I think I pretty much covered it all, and I think I have to end it. As hard as it is to end the review of The Rocketeer, I think I'm going to do it. So thank you very much for watching, and we shall catch you later. Oh man, I'm out of gas.